The world has changed since the End of Suburbia was released. Housing markets have skyrocketed, remote work has reshaped our cities, and millennials and Gen Z are redefining what it means to live, work, and build communities. But how much has really changed? And what does the future of suburbia look like?
We're in our early 30s right now, and we're very much at a time in our lives where our peers, our friends are starting families. And I think there's definitely a big difference from older generations and our generations and our generation when it comes to our approach to what good housing is. I think when we were in our late 20s, it was very much like we want to be connected, we want to be part of a community, we want to have that. And right now we're seeing this shift, which is surprising us too, once people are starting to have children and they need just more space. People that I think we didn't expect to make that transition out of the city are doing that, mostly because housing is not affordable in the cities anymore. Culture and the economy has just like shifted in ways that we could have never predicted. I think the advent of technology and how that plays a role in our generation also has a huge role in what it means to like live in one specific place versus another. I think before you had to be physically tied to a place, so that meant that you had to live like where you worked, and you also had to live where you wanted that community. But now that you have access to a lot of that stuff through virtual means, you know, you can like work online if you have the type of job that allows that, or you can find community online. We're finding that a lot of people are actually okay with the idea of leaving cities in order to have the space. That was a shift even within our generation within the past 10 years. So it's something that we're very much kind of coming to terms with ourselves.
Yeah, as we were just talking about the first time seeing the documentary, I remember seeing it shortly after I had moved from Hong Kong to Vancouver. And remember feeling very confused, you know, going from a really dense city to a city that's much quieter, much more sprawled. And I was living in a single family house with my family, and I was noticing all these differences, but I wasn't sure why this environment was the way it was. The fact that we had to drive everywhere to get to destinations that we wanted to. And then I remember seeing The End of Suburbia, and it so eloquently just put together this whole history and context as to why the suburbs came to be. The use of cheap fossil fuels, the need for housing, painting this almost like picture perfect kind of environment that was actually quite flawed in a lot of ways. And so I think for me, I remember seeing that and thinking, there was this one quote from James Howard Kunstler where he said that the suburbs were the greatest misallocation of resources of the 20th century. And I think that quote has always stuck with me. And as I grew up, and then, when I went to architecture school, which is where I met Erica, I started to question, how are the resources and ingredients that create the suburbs, these things that people want, how can those things be reoriented? How can we keep those same ingredients, but just use them in a different way to create a type of environment that is much more conducive to community living, to walkability, to energy efficiency, and vibrancy that you get in a city while still maintaining that sense of quiet.
Also kind of trailing back to my first moment of encountering the end of suburbia, I also had a similar move, although not as dramatic as Justin's, where I was going from one country to another. But my family, when I was first born, we lived downtown in Toronto. So I was in the annex for the first few years of my life. And then, like a lot of immigrant families, they wanted to just kind of expand and like grow their wealth. So they bought a home in Scarborough. I actually watched this documentary in one of my classes in undergrad. And I think just understanding that I and like so many families were part of this like bigger system of, the hyperconsumption, and like the energy usage is also kind of crazy. And that's also something that felt kind of like off to me, even as like a young person. So when we design our homes, I think we're always very conscious about like what is the footprint of a home that is really key to like getting that balance of like all the spaces that you want and you're going to feel comfortable in.
So we took the front yard concept and made this huge garden that sprawls between these small compact homes. And the landscape essentially becomes, this generative landscape. So we call the project the understory because it's just as much about the landscape as it is about the homes. The landscape provides space between each of the homes. It provides light and air where people can go out, enjoy the landscape, enjoy the gardens, grow food. And then the homes themselves are designed to be compact because they really make use of the landscape as part of their space. So in the renderings, we were trying to convey, that sense of openness. People want to enjoy the weather out in LA. Can you open up the kitchen and can the garden become part of the kitchen? Or can you go upstairs and sit under a canopy and feel like you're in a pergola or a patio? So I think to bring it back, our challenge with that project for us was to take the quintessential ingredients of the lifestyle of homes in LA and reorient them in a way that feels familiar but can increase density and foster a stronger sense of community. The missing middle is, if you think about, two extremes of the spectrum. On one end of the spectrum, you have high-rise development, which is extremely dense. You can fit a lot of people into a big apartment building. In New York, those apartment buildings might be 40 stories tall, even taller. You can fit hundreds of people into a building like that. And they share all the amenities, they share the elevators, they share the fitness room. It's a very efficient way of living, but that's very extreme. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have a single family home, which is very low density. And single family homes often come with a front yard, a driveway, a backyard, side yards. And so if you think about the number of people in a typical nuclear family, maybe 4, 5, 6 people in a family, they occupy one house. That's the other end of the housing spectrum. And then the missing middle is really this band somewhere in between where you have a townhouse or a row house, and then you have a big or a mid-rise apartment building. There are very few options in between that can house a number of families while still feeling like without feeling like a big apartment building. So I guess what is that? How can we create these urban environments where we don't have towers everywhere, we don't have single family homes everywhere, but it's something in the middle that's this kind of sweet spot. What if instead of doing a big block, we keep the footprints of the buildings compact and we just go up just a little bit more to achieve that unit count and density that a mid-rise building would have. Except we're providing this new open space that kind of meanders and weaves through the buildings the same way these arterial greenways in Vancouver connect neighborhoods. And so these new open spaces, they can be quiet, they can be activated. There might be a little cafe or a bookstore at the base of one building that opens up onto this garden, and that becomes one thing. There might be a playground in another garden, or there might even be, a water garden that collects rainwater and helps feed it back into the buildings. Coming back to that big question is what is this new development giving back to the neighborhood? I guess that's that's kind of like the running thesis through our work, is thinking about the open space that you find in a suburb, rearranging it in such a way that the open space and the new building have to exist together. So we took that idea and we're just thinking about new ways to reorient them so that it's mutually beneficial for everybody.
This conversation highlights the fundamental tension in urban planning today. People want space, affordability, and quality of life, but traditional suburban design often leads to sprawl, car dependency, and environmental inefficiency. The missing middle concept directly addresses this. Instead of forcing a choice between high-rise towers and single-family homes, urban planners are pushing for mid-density developments, townhomes, low-rise apartments, and shared green spaces that balance community with livability. In cities like Vancouver, greenways and compact housing developments are rethinking suburban landscapes. In Los Angeles, the challenge is making density feel natural, integrating gardens into homes, designing public spaces that foster community, and using land efficiently. The big question remains, can suburbia evolve into something more sustainable, connected, and affordable? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. What does your ideal urban environment look like? If you enjoyed this discussion, hit like, subscribe, and check out our next video on the future of urban resilience. See you next time.